Hey friends, this weekend the Wall Street Journal published the weekend review like they do every weekend. It's in the back of the Wall Street Journal, and the focus of this week's issue, the weekend review, was Venezuela. They got a big picture of Nicolas Maduro next to Hugo Chavez, the founder of the Bolivarian Revolution. The article is called "The Tragedy of Venezuela." And, it's not a surprising article. Blames the Venezuelan government for all the problems, says that, the Venezuelan government is responsible for everything that goes wrong. But this is the second paragraph. I'm going to read to you from the second paragraph right here of this article in the Wall Street Journal. And keep in mind, this is not the Daily Worker. This is not socialist news. This is the Wall Street Journal, a right-wing publication that does not approve of the Venezuelan government. And this is what they have to say in their anti-Venezuelan article. This is the second paragraph. Quote, "When I arrived in Venezuela in 2013, the party was still on. Oil was fetching $100 a barrel, and Mr. Maduro's populist government was showering petrodollars on everyone. The Caracas skyline was dotted with grandiose construction projects. Steakhouses were buying vintage scotch by the container loads, and hotels had to be reserved for weeks in advance." So, whenever Venezuela comes up, publications like the Wall Street Journal and publications like the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, all of them have this really, really simple explanation for all the problems. They say, Venezuela is a socialist country. People are starving and miserable because of socialism. Because whenever you have socialism, people just starve and are miserable. And that's because communism doesn't work. And, and capitalism is just the best system everywhere. And people, it's this nonsense that we hear in the United States. Well, what I just read to you, this paragraph that I just read, confirms what I've been telling people for a long time, which is that until 2014, when the oil prices dramatically decreased and went from $100 a barrel down to like $30 a barrel, or less than $30 a barrel, it was down to $27 a barrel at one point. Until that happened, Venezuela's economy was doing pretty well. Venezuela's socialist government is essentially centered around a state-controlled oil company. And when the oil prices were dramatically high and the state had a huge amount of revenue with which to stimulate the economy, things were going quite well in Venezuela. That the hardships they've experienced in Venezuela recently have come about recently due to the fact that the oil prices dramatically decreased in 2014, immediately following the death of the founder of the revolution, Hugo Chavez. There have been divisions in the ruling Socialist Party, the United Socialist Party. There's sabotage from, food importing companies that are importing food to Venezuela. There's sanctions imposed on them by the United States, that there's, the intelligence agencies of foreign countries are trying to stir up unrest and create difficulties. The problems in Venezuela are not caused by socialism. And if you want further proof of that, you can go elsewhere in Latin America. Go to Bolivia. They have a socialist government there, a Bolivarian socialist government, and people are not starving and miserable. People are not dying. You can go to Ecuador. They have a socialist government there. Again, people are not starving and miserable. You can go to Nicaragua. That's actually the most prosperous country right now in Central America. Right now, there's a huge increase in the standard of living in Nicaragua. You can go to Cuba. Right now, Cuba, which has just, had some economic adjustments, and they've adjusted their socialist system to be closer to the Chinese model. They're doing very well, too. A lot of Cubans are opening their own businesses, and the socialist society is bringing in more foreign investment. If it weren't for socialism, Russia and China would be third world countries right now, but instead they're world superpowers. What Stalin did with his 5-year plans, industrializing Russia, building steel mills and building hydroelectric power plants and bringing Russia into the future with central planning, what was done by the Chinese Revolution, in which they took what was the sick man of Asia and made it what it is today, the second largest economy in the world, all of that was done with socialism. This idea that socialism starves people to death, socialism causes poverty, socialism has failed everywhere it's ever been tried, is complete and utter nonsense. The crisis in Venezuela is about oil. It's about the fact that the oil price dramatically decreased. It's about the fact that there was political turmoil at the time the oil prices decreased. It's about the fact that there's been foreign sabotage. But it's not caused by socialism. And this idea that socialism creates poverty is complete and utter nonsense. Capitalism has kept so many countries throughout the third world in utter poverty. But it's socialism that has enabled countries to raise themselves up. And Russia and China are probably the best case studies of that. This idea that socialism, it just doesn't work, it leads to poverty, this is a lot of propaganda. And it's look at the Caribbean, right? Compare the way Cubans live to the way people live in Haiti, or the Dominican Republic, or Jamaica, or any of those capitalist countries all throughout the Caribbean. You think capitalism is so great. Ask someone from Mexico why they're fleeing their country. Ask people from Africa. Go to Nigeria. Nigeria's got loads of oil, just like Venezuela, except it has huge rates of poverty, huge rates of illiteracy, child labor. Nigeria has been doing business with American oil companies. They've got free market capitalism there. They let American and British oil companies do whatever they want, and their people are absolutely miserable. But what the countries around the world that have adopted socialism have achieved in terms of raising people out of poverty, providing people jobs and education and healthcare, and in terms of industrializing is really unprecedented. So anyone who tells you that the crisis in Venezuela is caused by socialism and they've just been poor and starving ever since they got on the socialist road, no, they are false. They are giving you false information. Venezuela's revolution began in 1999. Chavez announced that it was moving toward 21st century socialism in 2003. And up until 2013, even the Wall Street Journal, right here, admits that their economy was actually doing very well. The problems began in 2014 when the oil prices dropped. So anyone who tells you that socialism is the reason people are hungry in Venezuela, is the reason that there's problems in Venezuela, is lying to you. And furthermore, why don't I add that the United Nations has confirmed that there is not a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. The term humanitarian crisis is a specific legal term, and we have, prominent leaders of the UN have gone to the country and inspected it and said, yes, there are difficulties here. They're having trouble with their food imports. They're having difficulties, but humanitarian crisis? No, that's not what's taking place. So everything you've been told is a lie, right? The idea that socialism is causing all of Venezuela's problems is just a falsehood. And anyone who tells that to you is either intentionally lying to you or doesn't know what they are speaking about.